British astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle said, "The chances that higher life forms may have emerged through evolutionary processes is comparable with the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the material therein." Sir Fred Hoyle was an atheist. He was not arguing for a creationist approach here. He was arguing against abiogenesis. He was an astronomer who loved space, and he thought, wouldn't it be cool if life came from space dust? To have his fallacy presented as an argument for biblical creationism, which is not even what he was proposing, is just mind-blowingly idiotic. Hello lovely people, my name is Emma. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. Let's talk about education. I'm wearing one of my favourite pairs of jelly dinosaur earrings. That makes it sound like I've got loads of jelly dinosaur earrings. One of my favourite pairs of earrings, which happens to be jelly dinosaurs, because today we're talking about the teaching, or lack thereof, of evolution and general scientific theory in a number of schools globally, including in the UK. We like to think we're a little secular bubble here in the UK, despite the Church of England being our official national religion and so on. We like to think that we're a bit more, we don't really care. We have our little traditions that we really like, and otherwise religion is sort of whatever here. But there are a number of schools on the accelerated Christian education system operating in the UK under their European branch. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I have a very quick announcement before we dive in. Baffy is live. The Baffy plushie is now live and available to order. If you would like your own special soft son, you can order one between now and the end of the month, and this month only. It is a limited run, so get your orders in. He's a little soft purple buddy boy, and I love him so much, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited that something that I've made is going to be in people's homes. It's so cool. Look, he's excited too. Follow the link in the description to order your own Baffy plush today. Thank you so much. I am so excited. I can't wait to see some pictures of people's plushies when he hits their homes. Okay, let's talk about education. I found this story through a Sky News article, which I will link for you down below, so feel free to check that out if you would like to read it for yourself. I'm going to have a sip of coffee to emotionally prepare for this nonsense, and we shall begin. I am so sorry about the mess in the background. I just got back from 3 days of Comic-Con. It was amazing. I am so tired. There were like 2 people that recognized me from my videos and came and said hi, so if you guys are watching, thank you so much. You were so nice. You actually like made my day, made my weekend. It made me so happy. It was a very validating weekend. I had a creator pass that let me in a room. It was just an empty conference room with a coffee machine, but it felt really good. Okay, here's the I was a media studies student. The like tagline for this news article. Logline? No, that's not right either. It's like a film thing. The tagline, whatever it's called for this article. Students in schools using the accelerated Christian education curriculum are being taught human-caused climate change is not real, and evolution is impossible, a study has found. If you've seen much of my content, you'll be familiar with this idea that I spout a lot, which is that all of these conspiracies go hand in hand. I grew up with conspiracy theories. I believed that man-made climate change was a myth. So I didn't believe that. I didn't believe in the moon landing. General sort of anti-science, anti-establishment, New World Order stuff. And I believed a million things because these things all go hand in hand. Once you are invested in one conspiracy theory, it's very easy to fall into the rest. Maybe this is a little bit controversial, for which I apologise. I do believe that biblical creationism, biblical literalism, is a conspiracy theory. Because it is anti-science, it is anti-reality. It requires a rejection of that which can be demonstrated. Believing in this idea of creationism requires there to be a conspiracy, because all of the schools, and you've probably heard online preachers, if you watch that kind of stuff, you've probably heard them talk about these conspiracies where all the education systems and peer review, and it's all part of a plan, and you have to believe in a greater conspiracy hiding this truth to believe that the creation stories in the Bible are literally true. And again, I've never fully understood it because you have to decide between Genesis 1 and 2 which is the real creation story and which isn't. So I don't know. So I have a real vendetta, let's say, against children being taught this kind of conspiracy theory as fact. And that is exactly what these Christian schools are doing, this Christian education system. The accelerated Christian education system then was originated in, you know what, have a guess. Where do you think this started? I'll give you like a little countdown. Put your guess in the comments and then you can edit it and see if you were right. Ready? Texas. 10 points if you guessed Texas. The ACE curriculum originated in Texas in the 1970s, in 1970 specifically, and is used by at least 11 schools in the UK, as well as homeschooling. I knew a couple of people growing up who had been homeschooled on an American Christian education system. One of them was very into science and very pro-science, so it can happen. It can happen in a healthy way. He also thought I was going to hell for liking girls, so healthy is, I guess, debatable. So part of the reason for this updated kind of investigation is that climate change denial has been added to the textbooks as they've been updated over the last few years, according to this research. So the ACE curriculum presents every subject through a biblical worldview. And creationism is a cornerstone of its science lessons. Here's the thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with teaching religion and beliefs in your faith. I don't think there's any reason you can't have a good Christian education alongside a good science education. I think it's a terrible mistake to blur the two because one of them is simply not based in science and it's just very strange to inject that into the science curriculum. One of my favourite lessons in school, possibly unsurprisingly to the viewer, one of the ones I was the best at was religious studies, religions. And while my religious education was heavily dominated by Christianity, and specifically the Church of England, and, you know, that linked with our history classes and things, but we also learned about Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism. We did study other religions, and they were all presented as equally valid but different beliefs and separate to our science education. I think that's a really terrific thing. I wish I'd taken it further, maybe instead of maths, but that's a complaint for another day. I think teaching those faiths alongside some basic philosophy and ethics is a very good thing for kids. I think if you are a young person who's never heard of, say, Islam, except for something scary on the news, you're less likely to understand and accept a Muslim person when you meet them. If you've had an education and understand that there are all kinds of faiths from all over the world, then you're more culturally aware, you're more accepting, and just you have a better understanding of people. And I think that's just inherently a good thing. Likewise, there are religious parents who teach their children their faith and their beliefs presented as an option, presented as what we believe. Some people believe different things. And again, it's completely separate. It's not the same discussion as your science textbooks. As soon as it becomes your science textbooks are a lie because this faith is the only thing that is real, that's when you get cult-like, into conspiracy stuff. That's when you get super dangerous, which is what this ACE curriculum is. Researchers from University College London found pupils are not exposed to any ideas contrary to the literal interpretation of the Bible until year 9. Which is, I want to say, 13, 14? I think around that age. Which those researchers said goes against the legal requirement for schools to offer a broad and balanced science curriculum. The study's lead author, Dr. Jenna Scaramanga, told Sky News that pupils who study the curriculum end up misinformed and not able to weigh scientific evidence. I have always thought that something that is missing, especially today, granted it's been 10 years, well, since I was in school, it's been like 12 years, so maybe things are different now. I've always thought that the ability to critique sources, to identify good sources and bad sources is something that is missing from general education. It's something you don't really learn, or at least when I was a kid, you didn't really learn until you went to university how to spot a good source from a bad source, and that is part of why people are susceptible to misinformation. When your whole school texts are the bad source, the misinformation, you've got no frame of reference to how to spot a good source from a bad source. And again, you're susceptible to all this conspiracy thinking, especially if it links in with what you already believe. So, climate change denial is part of the big New World Order global conspiracy triangle where most people believe at least like 3 or 4, like I did. I don't know how to explain this without getting too like slippery slope. Once you believe in a couple of conspiracy theories, it's nothing to believe in all of them, right? Because there's already that shadow organization in place hiding some things from you. So of course they're hiding more from you. It's a really difficult thing to get across to people who haven't experienced it, so forgive me for not probably wording it very well. I'm going to share the website with you real quick for this Christian education system, the accelerated Christian education. I'm not really sure what that means, just you learn the Bible stuff really fast. According to what I've read, it's very hands-off and is more memorizing biblical facts than anything else, than anything very hands-on. Reaching the world for Christ, one child at a time. Oh, the core curriculum. Core curriculum provides students with academics. I don't even think the website is written very well. Would it not be the core curriculum? The core curriculum provides students with academics, skill building, reading practice, character and wisdom training, and knowledge of God and His Word. The complete package begins with reading development and progresses through high school, giving students a solid foundation for pursuing their life goals. Now I want to go back to the article because I believe this is a slightly misleading description of what this education system actually grants you. So this is a former student going by Tanya, not her real name, completely understandable that she wouldn't want to reveal her real name, who was homeschooled with ACE between the ages of 6 and 18. That is so long. I know for some people it works, but I feel like homeschooling is not the best thing for the majority of people. That is a really long time to be isolated in an education system that is completely false and built on conspiracy theories. I think that's awful. She described the science education she got as really poor with a lot of wrong information. She thought the theory of evolution was ridiculous, that it was a lie. She didn't believe in climate change. She said ACE promises that its qualifications will get you into university. They didn't. So she took the International Certificate of Christian Education, the ICCE, which is an ACE-specific qualification. The website says it's educationally robust and says that graduates have gone on to a wide range of institutions of higher education. So Tanya had to spend an extra year doing a university access course to be able to actually get a degree. So what the ACE schooling gave her was a lack of faith in science, a lot of false information, and then she didn't have access to higher education and had to pursue that outside, and now probably has more debt thanks to that. Good news though, just to inject a little bit of positivity into it, Tanya is now doing her second master's degree. She is determined not to let the schooling system ruin her life. Love that. Love that for her. While she's persevered with further education, Tanya said at 31, there is still so much I don't know about science. And she added that it's really embarrassing. It's just not fair for these children to be put through nonsense and stressful nonsense as well. As soon as you get into the conspiracy stuff, it's very scary. I imagine, I don't know because it's not my specific experience, but I would imagine that the kind of biblical literalism conspiracy theories have the element of fear that the New World Order sort of conspiracy theories injected in me as a kid. I had a lot of anxiety as a kid as a result. And I mean, if you're being taught that mainstream institutions, education, governments are lying to you or putting out false truths as a result of Satan or sin or whatever, how do you know what to trust at all? How do you have any faith in anything other than what your school has taught you? Here's an excerpt from a textbook. Did you know, it begins, evolutionists, not a real word. It's not a real term, it's not a real scientific term. Huge red flag for the textbook in general. Let's just say that. Evolutionists supposed the elements found in nature were randomly placed together, already kind of injecting terminology that doesn't really make sense. They weren't placed together because they weren't placed. It kind of implies a creator in a strange way. Were randomly placed together to form the basic building blocks that form more complex living organisms. British astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle said, "The chances that higher life forms may have emerged through evolutionary processes is comparable with the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the material therein." In other words, the probability is next to impossible. This argument is known as the junkyard tornado, or Hoyle's fallacy. Here's the thing about Sir Fred Hoyle and this fallacy, this idea. It was directly opposed to abiogenesis, yes, which is the idea that there was a transition from non-living to living entities on planet Earth through complex evolutionary processes. That's a very, very, very basic explanation because I am not a scientist. So Hoyle did not believe in abiogenesis. He believed in, let me find the word for it because I can't remember, panspermia. Panspermia is the idea that life, microbiotic life, exists in space dust. They can survive the effects of space and can be carried on meteorites or whatever. Essentially, it takes the problem of the origin of life and just puts it elsewhere. It doesn't actually answer the question. It more says, well, life can't have originated on Earth. It probably came from space where something else happened to make it start. It's kind of silly, and it contradicts a lot of the demonstrated effects of evolutionary theory. The point being, Sir Fred Hoyle was an atheist. He was not arguing for a creationist approach here. He was arguing against abiogenesis. He was an astronomer who loved space, and he thought, wouldn't it be cool if life came from space dust? He did not think that life came from God. He did not believe in creationism. He did not believe in God at all. He was an atheist. So to have his fallacy, which is already contradictory to mainstream science, and again, the demonstrated effects of evolution, blah, 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 presented as an argument for biblical creationism, which is not even what he was proposing, is just mind-blowingly idiotic. I'm sorry, ACE, education system, whoever is responsible for the textbooks. This feels like they've looked up a famous quote. You know, they've heard the junkyard tornado, and they've been like, that's brilliant, I'll write that down, that makes it sound, it's just how could it be possible? The chances are really slim, without actually understanding the scientist making the argument, or what his actual position was, or what he was arguing in favour of. That's so dumb. And it terrifies me that that's part of a scientific textbook aimed at young people in education. What else does it say? Like, it's deeply worrying. It's deeply fucking worrying. Here's another excerpt from a textbook. To explain the existence of the universe, there must have been a power that brought the heavens and earth into being. Must there? A power that created space, matter, and time. So that's already... Okay, now listen, I'm a huge nerd. I'm not a scientist. My scientific background is very, very minimal. I do like, for some reason, I've been really interested in theories on time. Specifically quantum gravity and how those things relate. And I am very aware how easy it is to misunderstand what space and time are, particularly what space is. And the idea that space and matter are separate things is very old school in terms of scientific understanding. Space itself is more of a fabric. It's made of waves and matter like everything else. It's not a separate thing. It's not a space. Maybe the problem is the word. Maybe the word and its other connotations is what gives us this difficulty in understanding, but it's not a space to contain things. It is a thing that is part of all the other things that make up the universe. That to me that just demonstrates that the author of this book is not in any way keeping up to date with scientific understanding, scientific theory. They're not updating these books based on the latest science in any way, because I would hope that the author of a scientific textbook made for education would know more about the latest science than I do, because I know virtually nothing. Evidently, that is not the case. A power that created Earth with everything necessary to support life, and a power that created the first man and woman, the animals, the plants, and all life. Not only must there be a power, but that power must be an eternal living being. Citation needed? Nothing they've said requires an eternal being. The Bible states that God, through his Son Jesus Christ, was that first cause. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. It's just very bizarre to me to have this as part of a science education, as part of mainstream schooling. You know what I mean? as part of your main schooling through this system. This obviously is not mainstream, thank goodness. So I guess to contrast what I, recall learning in school, what I would have had as a sort of equivalent would be, this exact sort of thing, but in a religious textbook, and it would have been like, Christians believe, for a long time Christians believed, some Christians still believe this, most Christians now accept this as potentially metaphorical or allegorical, which is obviously the case. This is the other thing about these cult-like, really isolated, insular religious education systems. They don't just isolate you from mainstream science and education and life, society. They isolate you from mainstream Christianity in this case, because most Christians don't believe in biblical literalism or biblical creationism. Again, there's no reason you can't have a Christian education alongside a real, tangible scientific education. And it just upsets me that children are completely missing out on that children have this, that they're being shown this view that there is the truth, there is Jesus Christ and God, and this is how the universe was made. And then there are evolutionists and people misleading us with their fake science. Like, those are the two groups. Like, there's not Christians in the middle with faith and love for Jesus and rational understanding of science. It's just, I wish I could take those kids and be like, hey, here's a religious scientist that studies astronomy. Please listen to them and their worldview to understand that you're in a cult, basically. Because they've got no way of knowing. They've got no way of knowing, especially if they're being homeschooled on this system. Oh, that's why I hate it so much. So Dr. Scaramanga, who produced this study, published it in the academic journal Cultural Studies of Science Education. She is hoping that the rules can be changed to improve the prospects of children in these systems. Frankly, when I was reading this, the first thing that sort of came to me was like, is that legal? Can that be legal in the UK in 2023? Excluding the legal requirement for a broad and balanced science curriculum, which is extremely vague in its wording, it's essentially they can basically teach whatever they want. There are guidelines for independent schools. This is guidance for independent schools published by the government, the UK government, Independent School Standards. Number 2.8 is what I want to draw your attention to. Independent schools may teach creationism as part of a belief system, but it should not be presented as having a similar or superior evidence base to scientific theories. That is 100% absolutely not being followed by the ACE schools. Not in any way. It's not just teaching that evolution is an inferior theory, it's teaching that it's like wrong, a conspiracy. Evolutionists are evil and it's impossible and ridiculous. Like, that is the most flagrant disregard of this guidance that you could possibly have. Sky News contacted all 11 schools affiliated with ACE, requesting an interview about the science curriculum, but none responded, which is pretty standard. To freeze out journalism on issues like this is quite normal in this kind of situation. A Department for Education spokesperson did say that independent schools were free to set their own curriculum but must meet the independent school standards. Clearly ACE schools are not, so whether they're actually going to investigate and do anything about it remains to be seen. The best we can do is make this information as mainstream as possible in the hope that that provokes them into doing something. Because I am the way that I am, and because I thought it was only fair in reporting on this to give them the opportunity to speak for themselves, I did email the ACE education body. Given that Sky News contacted them and didn't get any response, I don't expect to hear back from them either, but you gotta try, haven't you? So here's my Karen questions for the Christian Education Service. I sent them section 2.8 of the Independent School Standards Guidelines, noting that Dr. Scaramanga doesn't believe that this is being adhered to, and from reports from former students, this clearly doesn't seem to be the case. I said, on a related note, some former pupils have referred to their ACE education as cult-like and extremely damaging, discussed feeling embarrassment as well as being unprepared for higher education, and I asked what they would say to those former pupils. The ICCE describes itself as educationally robust and implies an avenue to higher education. However, former pupils of the ICCE have required external university access courses to be able to access higher education. Many consider this framing of the qualification as misleading, having the potential to sabotage the futures of pupils who attend. Another former ACE student has described the science denial in ACE textbooks as paving the way for conspiracy beliefs such as vaccine denial. Do you believe that this is a risk in promoting a science oppositional education system? In a textbook published in 2016, students are told, if fish evolved into frogs, fish should no longer exist, but obviously they do. This is the "why are there still monkeys?" creationism argument, which you may be familiar with. This is a deeply incorrect portrayal of the theory of evolution and belies a serious lack of scientific understanding by the textbook writers. Do you feel it is just or Christ-like to mislead pupils about scientific theory in order to demonize it? I got a little bit spicy in my email, okay? Either when they make these textbooks, they are lying to make mainstream science seem evil, which is not very Christ-like, or they know so little about this theory that they shouldn't be writing scientific textbooks. It's one or the other. Probably, if we're being honest, it's probably a healthy mix of both. Just to very briefly deal with this then, the why are there still monkeys, or in this case, why are there still fish question, sort of, I mean, the real answer is, why shouldn't there be? Why would there not be? You know? It interprets evolution as this series of consecutive progressive steps, one after the other. One thing changes into another thing, changes into another thing, changes into another thing, and really it's much more complex than that. The easiest way to think about evolution is a branching tree. I found a good article in Overcoming Obstacles to Understanding Education in Biomed Central that I quite like that explains this quite well. So I'll leave a link for you down below and I'll share with you the analogy that they use. Perhaps the easiest way is through the analogy of human family categories, especially that of cousins. Students often don't recognise they have two classes of relatives in their own family: lineal and collateral. The progressive ladder model of evolution highlights only the lineal relatives: grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren, etc. I can hear a cat screaming outside. Maybe it was a child? Is it weird if I can't tell the difference? Anyway, however, collateral relatives such as cousins, aunts, nephews, and so forth are also family members. In any large extended family, it's likely the majority of relatives will be collateral rather than lineal ones. So too in the extended family of all living things. And then there's a useful diagram here which I will include for you. There isn't this line of monkey, ape-like ancestor, chimpanzee, then human. Rather, we are all relatives in the same family tree, so to speak. That is something that is quite easy to misunderstand if you have had a basic education, if you are very young, not, I would argue, if you are writing a scientific textbook, any textbook claiming to be part of a scientific curriculum. It is appalling for that kind of basic misunderstanding of evolution to be included in any argument for or against it. It's just appalling. That should not be legal. It shouldn't be allowed. Those were all my questions. I got an automated response saying we will aim to get back to you within 5 working days. If I hear back, there'll be an insert here, or if I don't hear back till late, there'll be a pinned comment. Again, they didn't get back to one of the biggest news broadcasters in the UK. They're probably not going to get back to me, Muggins here, but I tried. I think it's only fair to try. I'm going to finish up with another of Dr. Scaramanga's comments, because I think this is really good and important. She argues that nationally recognised qualifications such as GCSEs and A-levels should be a requirement. I agree. While I certainly don't believe that our education system is perfect, and in many ways I would like to destroy it and rebuild it from the ground up. What can I say? I'm a person coming from the arts. Regardless, having institutions to safeguard the basic education that children need is fundamentally very, very important, and at least that is a benefit of having a religious school within the system, as opposed to this religious education curriculum which is so hands-off and so flagrantly untrue in what it claims to be science. At least if a school is in the system, it is beholden to certain regulations. Granted, ACE is supposed to be beholden to certain regulations as well, and that is just not happening. In general, there is just nowhere near enough oversight. This has been 40 years, this education system has been going, and just ruining kids' lives, making them believe in and susceptible to more conspiracy theories. At the very least, if GCSEs were a legal requirement, the students would have to learn mainstream science, at least to to that level, at least they would get an alternative viewpoint, a reasonable alternative viewpoint created by experts in the field. It is so clear from what we've looked at from the ACE textbooks. The writers of the textbooks are either no science education or they've completely foregone it for what they've written. Dr. Scaramanga said, "The children who are being deprived of an education because of this system matter. They deserve better. It might be that there are very few of them, but they matter because every child matters." And I couldn't agree more. It is so easy, especially with conspiracy theories, and especially on the internet when it's easy and anonymous to point and laugh at silly things. It's so easy to look at people who believe crazy conspiracy theories and go, "You fool! How could you believe something so ridiculous?" So many of these people are isolated in these systems that don't give them any other opportunity. And that's not fair. The way to deal with conspiracy theories is, like many things, it's preventative. It's to have the education system in place to allow them to identify conspiracy theories, to allow them to identify bad sources from good sources, and B, to force dodgy systems, I'm sorry, but dodgy systems like this accelerated Christian education to comply with basic education requirements. These children do deserve better. They deserve to have the opportunity not to grow into an isolated conspiracy monger. This biblical literalism already is very us and them. It's very othering. The world outside is sinful and scary and dangerous, and you shouldn't listen to those other perspectives. You should just listen to us. It's already preparing people to be hugely isolated, and that makes it so hard to break out of that thinking. So for us, it's also important to try and have a bit of compassion, a bit of understanding, because it's not really their fault. The children that went through this education system aren't to blame for what they were taught. It becomes very difficult because, of course, at least the majority of the parents giving their children this particular education also believe they are doing the right thing. They believe on a spiritual level, on a fundamental level, that they are protecting their children from the worst of the world. Here's something that I often think. This is, I guess, a mix of my personal opinion and my understanding of the Bible. I understand why it would be tempting to isolate your child from all the potential sin and danger and misinformation in the world. However, from a biblical perspective and just from a reasonable person perspective, if I were a Christian, it would seem to me far more likely and far more effective for a false prophet, for a false teacher to infiltrate Christian education systems than it would the entirety of the globe, the entirety of mainstream education, science all across the world. What better way to mislead Christians than to target them when they're young with the voice of a preacher, speaking for God? Just something to think about. I've been doing a lot of news lately. There's just been so much in the news that has shocked and surprised and horrified me that I've felt the need to talk about it. Do please leave your thoughts down below. Every little bit helps. In honour of my new t-shirt that I got at MCM. Let me know if you're a sleepy boy. If you're a sleepy boy, let me know in the comments. But especially leave your thoughts down below if you are familiar with, if you have been through any kind of education system like this, a religious education system, homeschooling, something that is quite isolated, and how that has affected you. It would be so helpful to hear from those people. As a reminder for you heathens out there, the Baffy plushies are now live. They are on sale for all of this month and this month only. Follow the links down below. Make sure you pick up your own little buddy. Make sure you order one today. Buy one for your friend. Buy one for your chicken. I don't care. Buy one, please. Remember to do all the things like subscribing and hitting the like button and sharing this video if you enjoyed it, if you thought it was useful. Please consider checking out my other channels. They are all linked in the description if you like gaming stuff, if you like vlogging stuff. I got a big old bunch of footage from MCM to edit together that is probably already up at the time of your watching. If you would like comment priority and some very silly emotes, including one of Baffy's little face, you can become a channel member today, or tomorrow, or never. I don't really mind. The best way to support this channel is over on the Patreon, and with that I must give a big old shank you to my giant chickens and colossal quackers over on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a very lovely week, and I will see you really soon.